Now, yesterday I did this video about key takeaways from the Lex Fridman Zelensky interview, and I did that and I was satisfied that I really captured what Zelensky was trying to communicate through the process. But then I saw this and I thought, wow, this is a really smart approach. So Oleg Kostur, he said this, I did one better. I 3-hour podcast with Zelensky compressed into 5-minute stream of nothing but Lex. So, what were his questions? What was he really trying to get at? So, we're going to listen to this, just his questions, and ask yourself, like, what does he want to achieve here as you're listening to Lex just ask Zelensky questions? There's a little bit of setup, and then you see question after question after question after question. So,
Language, after all, is much more than a cold sequence of facts and logic statements. There are words, when spoken in the right sequence and at the right time, that can shake the world.
okay, now that was because in his setup in the video, he did about 14 minutes of a monologue just talking about what you're about to see. And he was talking about how Zelensky only spoke in Ukrainian, and he did that for a reason, and we'll come back to that at the very end.
Now, it is true that I plan to travel to Moscow and to speak with President Vladimir Putin.
It's effective and impactful if we speak in Russian. I hope that today many Russians will hear this, that Vladimir Putin will hear this. Even though it is sometimes said that Russian is banned in Ukraine, what I would want, I do have what some might call a naive dream of you sitting down with Putin and Trump and negotiating a deal about a ceasefire. What you said about the children is a tragedy. War is hell. But let me say again, we must find a path to peace.
There is one.
What is it? To make it clear, let's describe. Into NATO. There are many options for peace that don't involve NATO inviting Ukraine as a member. Once again,
He sure doesn't seem to want Ukraine to be part of NATO, and he sure seems to have this perspective. And that's okay. He can come with a number of questions, and he should push against Zelensky and test what he has to say. But you're hearing the same thing again and again in multiple ways.
Come on.
without NATO guarantees, I have a dream that, let's say, on January 25, or sometime at the end of January this year, you will sit down with Donald Trump, with Vladimir Putin, and together negotiate a ceasefire with strict security guarantees. And an agreement will be signed. What will this look like without NATO? I think that, yes, he is in fact ready to talk. I have never talked to Vladimir Putin, but I have a feeling that he is ready because Donald Trump is ready. I hope you are ready. And this is not just a feeling, but a dream. I have a dream here that the three of you will get together in a room and make peace. And I want to understand what it looks like, what security guarantees look like that would satisfy Ukraine, that would satisfy Russia. There's a lot of ideas, partnerships with Global South, India, Middle East, Saudi Arabia, экономические partnerships, political partnerships. The number of
Now,
soldiers.
he was asking about these partnerships, trying to give an alternative to NATO. NATO clearly isn't going to work. So, how about this?
Yes.
And the number of artillery rounds is not everything. As you have said, let's say Donald Trump guarantees security for 4 years. You can form partnerships with India, with Saudi Arabia that enforce
punishment, the stick on oil prices, for example, if any aggressive action is taken. You can actually even build, I've met a lot of incredible Ukrainian tech people, IT people. You can build great companies that form partnerships with the United States, that form partnerships with China. And that is a big leverage against aggression of however many million artillery rounds. And that, a sheet of paper, you don't need a sheet of paper of protection. It's okay with you, but it's not going to be okay with the president of Russia.
Unfortunately, the reality is that a compromise is needed. It will be very difficult to negotiate. If you think that the president of a country is completely crazy, it is really hard to come to an agreement with him. You have to look at him as a serious person who loves his country and loves the people in his country. Putin, do you think he
And this is one of the places where he tipped his hand the most, where he was talking about how, like, no, you just don't get Putin. You got to understand. You got to think about it this way, and it was really interesting to watch.
doesn't love his country?
Just because war is waged in terrible ways that it is, does not mean the leader does not love their country. But I take your point. I once again have a dream that even if there's hate, that you sit down with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and you find a way to peace. Let me ask you a question.
What do you think? Will there ever be a day when the Ukrainian people forgive the Russian people and both peoples will travel back and forth again and marry each other?
Okay. So what do you think about that? Like that was the line of question. And look, this isn't cherry picked and manipulated. This was pretty much the kind of things he said all the way through. Okay, so you take away from that, no NATO. NATO's bad. We don't want to see Ukraine in NATO. That's pretty much a Russian position. You see, I have this dream that you're going to be sitting down with Putin. How many times did he come back to that about sitting down with Putin? And so you saw it, you heard it. So I want to hear your comments below. And by the way, the last video about Lex Fridman got more views. It's like 3 times, 4 times as many views as all my other videos normally get. As far as, no, sorry, not views, more comments, because like you were getting to see this. And I was really glad to see that you all were watching that and being able to see what Zelensky said, because Zelensky was like a rock. His background in, like people joked about him, like he was a comedian and he was an actor and things along that has served him really well in being able to communicate what he needs to communicate. Okay, just a few things I want to show you here. So there's a serious question. This is Republicans against Trump. Serious question. How did Lex Fridman become popular? Why is this podcast so successful? He doesn't seem like a smart or interesting guy at all. Maybe I'm missing something. Well, I think you are missing something. He is a very smart guy, right? His career in 2014, Fridman was hired by Google to continue his dissertation work on the use of AI for identity authentication, but he left the company after only 6 months, stating he prefers the chaos of research and the academic environment. In 2015, he moved to MIT's Age Lab to work on psychology and big data analytics to understand driver behavior. So let's not discount him and say, well, he's just not a serious guy or he's not a smart guy. And don't do that to your opponent. Understand who they are. So Lex Fridman has 4.4 million subscribers on his podcast. Somebody's listening. Now, you could say, well, there's just a bunch of Russian bots and trolls and like it's amped up. Maybe it is. I don't know. But still, some people are listening to him. So we have to take this seriously. Okay. Then you have Che Baos. Now, I don't take Che Baos seriously. He's always shilling for Russia, for RT, that sort of thing. According to Alexei Arestovich, one of Zelensky's once Zelensky's closest advisor, all negotiations are conducted in Russian. Now, this goes back to the point about the idea that he's only going to speak in Ukrainian. Now, he's speaking in Ukrainian for a reason. We'll talk about that in a moment. But his advisor said all conversations behind the scenes are conducted in Russian. In the president's office, Russian is spoken. Everyone without exception, including Zelensky, always. Okay, so maybe they speak in Russian fluently between people. That's okay. The point was he's not going to speak in Russian for this particular interview. He's making the statement of that we're speaking in Ukrainian because we are Ukraine. And it's trying to publicly say that this is who we are and what we're about. Even if they toggle between those Ukrainian, Russian, whatever, in normal conduct of things. But beyond that, this guy here is a guy that's kind of stabbed Zelensky in the back. Maybe he was a trusted advisor at one time, but he's also the guy that was the source, we can't tell you who our sources are, with the terrible article here that really hurt Zelensky back in 2023. Like insider source say they don't believe that such and such, whatever. Well, it was this guy here. So, okay. Now, I also talked yesterday about how this was from Igor Shushko, and good on him for finding this. Lex Fridman falsified the translation in the interview to propagate the Kremlin narrative that Ukraine is stealing U.S. money and weapons, editing the segment in the first minute of 3 hours to ensure millions watch Zelensky dub with a fake AI voice, repeatedly say that Ukrainians just get a slap on the wrist. Now, I talked about that in this video here, that I talked about that slap on the wrist kind of thing and pointed out Igor Shushko's thing, but I'm going to add to what we talked about yesterday, because I thought that sounded funny. And then when I saw the translation, and that the translation was actually something pretty significant, I thought, oh, okay, so it's not slap on the wrist. It means more like hit them hard on the hands. Okay, so here's the Ukrainian, and I don't speak Ukrainian, right? And here's the Russian. Right, so you can see this for yourself. You can pause the video if you want to read that. And then here's the English, where it said, and we saw the risk, something that could be a weapon, and we would slap everyone on the wrist. Well, a slap in the wrist idiom in the United States means just like, hey, don't do that again. And you can go with not a lot of consequences. But the options for translation he put out here included: we slapped everyone's hands. We hit everyone's hands. We beat everyone's hands. We cracked down on everyone. We cracked down hard on everyone. We firmly reprimanded everyone. We punished everyone. Okay, so those were the options, and the translation went with this. So when you see that, and then you see the way that all the line of questioning went, it makes you wonder, like, what's going on. So I want to show you one more thing, and like, let's put the best face on it possible. This is Vlad Vexler talking about the flaw with Lex Fridman. His aspiration to reconcile Putin and Zelensky is the assumption that Putin is motivated by positive attitudes, such as justice and love of country. Now, maybe he is, but I don't think he is. And I think that there's a difference between the way that Putin thinks fundamentally and the way that the Western leaders think fundamentally. Putin's invasion may be brutal, but it's just love of country gone wrong. Not really. That's not. I don't think that's it at all. And that's the way that Lex seems to be coming at this. In reality, Putin is largely driven by negative values like power and destructiveness, and maybe something else like restoring the Soviet Union or something like that. But I think we have to factor that in. So at the end of the day, it kind of looked like this meme. What happened? Well, Putin invaded us and murdered our children. Well, can't you just find a way to just get along? I would be wondering about this too. I mean, Zelensky showed incredible fortitude and patience in that video yesterday. Okay, so tell me what you think about this. I thought that Oleg, and by the way, shout out to Oleg Kostor. He did a great job by compiling these, and that helps us understand where Lex Fridman is coming from. All right. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.